Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Beacon, where we discuss the news behind the news. I'm Daralyse Lyons, Chief Revenue Officer at the Bucks County Beacon, joined by Emily Smith, owner and publisher. And hi, Emily. Well, before this recording started, Emily and I were discussing what to talk about, and we decided that we might want to talk about what we actually do and not take for granted that people know the various roles that happen in a newsroom. And I'm just going to tell a brief story before I kick it over to Emily with my question. But I used to be a publisher and executive director prior to coming to work as the Chief Revenue Officer of the Bucks County Beacon. And when I was asked to step into the role of publisher, I didn't actually know what a publisher was, and I had to go home and Google it. And I'd been working in the journalism space for a while, but never at a specific news organization that had a paper product, a newspaper product. And so working in the industry, Emily, I had no idea what a publisher did. And I still don't completely know what a publisher does, even though I worked as a publisher prior to this. So what does a publisher do in general? And what do you as publisher do for the Bucks County Beacon?
Yeah, it's funny because I just Googled it too. Yeah. A publisher is a person, company, or organization responsible for producing and distributing materials like books, magazines, newspapers, or software. So, yeah, I'm the boss lady. That's what I know. Yeah. And I'm responsible for making sure that there are people to do the work and that people get paid. And, I make vision calls on what we do. I would say that is like the majority of my publisher role, which I think overlaps with owner role. And I think owners and publishers in for-profit space usually occupy the same space.
I was going to say, to me, like whenever I've described the role, I say it's like a CEO of a for-profit and an executive director of a nonprofit. And people seem to understand that, even though news is its own animal, but like you are at the top of the sort of org chart and you make decisions and the buck stops with you and you're responsible for the hiring and firing, for the making sure that payroll is made, doing budget projections, et cetera. And so like, I think it can be it's very strategic, it's financial, but then also because of your unique background, like you're also creating ads and like helping with editing and like doing copy. Like, you do a lot that I think goes beyond the scope of what maybe a publisher at a larger org might do.
Right. Yeah. I think it's small independent orgs, publishers or executive directors end up doing a lot more than what it says on paper. I would give myself some other titles that I don't put on anywhere. So that would be Chief Creative Officer, because I am in charge of the visual look of everything, and I manage our creative department, which is one other person. I am Chief Technical Officer because I manage the website and any kind of emails and all of that stuff. That'd be your IT lead. I feel like there's another one. Chief
HR?
Marketing.
You're head of HR? Yeah.
Head of HR. I would say maybe I'm Chief Marketing Officer too. Like,
Right.
I do lots of the ad stuff. So that would,
Well, it's really interesting because one of the things that I was this is over a month ago now, but I went to the LenFest Press Forward Journalism Conference, and at that conference, Feather Houston and Mark, I'm blanking on his last name, but they presented a report that the Wincoat Foundation, which is a foundation that supports many different like avenues and topics and areas of expertise. But one of the things that the Wincoat Foundation supports is journalism. And they gave a talk about sort of news organizations and sustainability. And one of the things that they were talking about was how a lot of people who step into the publisher role actually have like a background in journalism, and how they sort of have to unlearn a lot of what they learned in the journalism space in order to be successful at business development and marketing and entrepreneurship. And one of the things that I took away from that conversation is kind of what you were talking about, Emily, which is that as a publisher, you come with a certain history and expertise and career experience, and then it's very easy to bring that career experience into the work that you do. But sometimes it gets in the way of being able to do the main job, which is the owner publisher job, because you're the one doing the website development and the ad building. But like in another org, the publisher might find it difficult to stop interviewing people and doing reporting and to take their time to do more of like the business administration and development.
Yes. And I would say that is an interesting thing about our organization is that I came with very little journalism experience. I did have a column in a design magazine in Miami 20 years ago, almost. Technovations.
Yeah.
I just wrote little blurbs about very expensive things that rich people bought. It wasn't that exciting. So other than that, I had no journalism experience. And, Cyril comes all journalism experience and really not a lot of the business development side or any of that. So I think that has helped us because I have all this technical knowledge and startup knowledge, entrepreneurial stuff. And he has all the editorial stuff, so we don't bump into each other too much, which I think is good.
It is good. It's very good. I think I am, a lot of people in the industry, there's like this, I don't know if it's mythology or if it's just stereotype or whatever, but there's often like a sense that, publishers and editors, it's hard for them to get along because of the differences in visions or opinions or this and that. And I think because Cyril kind of has his lane and you have your lane, and everyone in the org is in agreement with the larger vision of the Beacon, right? As like helping people to become informed citizens and have the information that they need to make decisions about voting and where they live and what they do and where they shop. Like, I think that because of that, it makes it a little easier to navigate, maybe.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, of course, publishers and editors will always have conflict at some point.
Yeah, right.
But we've done pretty well over the last. Cyril's worked for me for 4 years.
Yeah, I think it's 4. I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. So overall, it's been a very successful relationship. But yeah, so that's another spot, right? Cyril is the editor-in-chief. So what does he do?
Yeah. What does he do?
Yeah. So he's in charge of all the writers. He edits the stories. A lot of times, some writers come to us with ideas for stories, and then sometimes he has an idea for a story and assigns it to writers, and then he works with the writers to craft the story in the right voice, tone, all of those things. He does copy editing. He does fact checking. He told me an anecdote about a fact-checking thing about the budget yesterday, that there was almost a $500,000 error in our reporting the other day about the budget. So, it's things like that, and larger organizations have dedicated fact-checking teams, dedicated editing teams that are, not the top of the line, like not the end of the top of the stack, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's important. For me, before I got into the industry, I thought of an editor as someone who just read whatever it was, whether it was the book or the story or whatever, and looked for errors and omissions and how can this be better? And Cyril does all of that, but he also kind of helps with the pre-work of shaping a story and shaping coverage. So, we have our reporter, Ben Bennett, and, Ben might come to Cyril and say, hey, I have this idea for a story. And then Cyril helps him think in advance about who might you want to speak to be able to get a representative mix of voices and perspectives on this particular issue. And so it really is, I think the best editors are collaborative in nature. They understand that a reporter is going to go out there and dig up stuff that we didn't expect in advance, and the story will take shape on its own. But I think they are ultimately responsible for making sure that a reporter does their due diligence and that a story is factually correct, but not just factually correct, that it actually gets to the heart and the meat of an issue. Like, we're not just regurgitating press releases at the Beacon, right? We're reporting on the whole depth and breadth of a subject matter so that people can understand it in order to be informed, in order to make the decisions that they need to make. And so we want to give them as much information as possible in as comprehensive a way and digestible a way as possible. And there's a lot of work that goes into that, and a lot of sort of visionary thinking that on Cyril's part, but then being in the weeds. Like, he does some writing and reporting on his own. He writes some opinion pieces. He is the one who oversees the Signal podcast and does all of those interviews. And so, like, there, I think, to the point that you were making earlier, Emily, like, everyone at the Beacon wears more than just one hat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, Cyril does a lot. I mean, like, even with Ben, like, Cyril has contacts that Ben doesn't have. He's new to the area. And so Cyril is making connections to community members for Ben so that he can, have people to interview. I mean, it's stuff like that. So, and also, as you can imagine, because he's an editor, Cyril reads everything, not everything we put out, like everything.
Yeah.
He is constantly reading stuff. We reprint some articles from, some other news organizations, and he's reading all of everything they put out so that he can pick ones that are appropriate for our audience. And I imagine that takes him a lot of time. I have tried to be the editor a week here, a week there as necessary, and I don't get close to doing a good job.
Yeah, I don't like being I mean, I've also filled in as editor, not here, but at other orgs, and I'm like, I don't like this job.
I don't like it.
No, I don't like this job. But Cyril seems to love it, and that's great, and what I really appreciate is his humility. I think sometimes editors can be territorial. Sometimes humans can be territorial. It's not just something about the editorial role, but like, we'll get grant applications or something, and I'll pitch him an idea or something, and he always has very good feedback, but he has never said, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I'm not going to participate, or, like, he's very much a team player and very interested in how do we collectively make the Beacon better. And so I know sometimes, if community members write in with complaints or questions or suggestions or whatever, he has always been very receptive to having those conversations and seeing, like, what we can do within the scope of our budgetary limitations and time,
right,
etc.
Yes, and he fields lots of tips. That's the other thing he does. Lots of tips, lots of complaints, lots of, oh, you should have covered it this way,
Right. Yes.
The amount of politicians, press secretaries that he has had to take phone calls from is, it's a list.
Yeah, right. And I mean, journalists and editors need to have a relatively thick skin, I think, and believe in the mission over, sort of like principles before personalities or whatever. Like, this idea that people can be mad and frustrated, or, give a quote on the record and then come back and say, oh no, and you have to make some judgment calls as an editor about, like, and have a lot of integrity. And I really appreciate that he does that. And then we have sort of like, I mean, we mentioned Ben. Before talking about Ben, there's Melinda Rizzo, who works for us part-time, and she does a lot of writing and a lot of reporting, and I think on, like, retainer to do that part-time work, but she also mentors and oversees our interns. And right now we have Chris Hetrick is interning for us. I think his internship will be over at the end of the summer, and he'll go back to school being a full-time student. And then she's, overseeing Ben as he onboards at the Beacon, and just in his sort of early development, she and Cyril are both meeting with Ben and reviewing stories, et cetera. And so, yeah, let's talk a little bit about, like, what Melinda does for us.
Yeah, I mean, she puts out, I've seen her invoices for, I think she's been with us for a year and a half, maybe. She puts out a fair amount of our stories. So she writes 3 or 4 feature stories a month, and then she'll write a lot of briefs just covering some of the stuff that's going on around Bucks County. She covers the county commissioners. But then for Ben and Chris, she's also not just mentoring them, she's also editing their stories ahead of time.
Yeah.
So it's taking that off of Cyril's plate, although Cyril is then the last set of eyes. So that's something we haven't had before, which, sometimes Cyril has me copy edit things because he's always like, I'm the only set of eyes, you know? And I think that is an important, nice thing that, has become of Melinda's position with us. And she's a great writer.
Yeah, she's a great writer and she loves mentoring. And I think it's very helpful too for a reporter, especially like an early career journalist, I think, to be able to get feedback from multiple sources as they're working. And I think the way that it's working, like Naomi Watts, I think she was an intern with us before I came on board. So I didn't ever get to know her or meet her, but I saw a lot of the work that she produced. I think she produced like 30 stories in her short time with the Beacon. And now I look at our weekly roundup emails where we put in all the stories for the week, and it's Chris Hedrick, Chris Hedrick, Chris Hedrick, Chris Hedrick. So, I think we're really able to give our early career journalists like a lot of reporting experience, and that's so valuable. And that is a direct result of Melinda and Cyril both pouring time and energy into their work, because if it was just sort of one, like if it was just Cyril and he was also editing all of the other freelancers and shaping all the stories and assigning everything, I don't think that Chris or Ben would have the opportunity to produce as many stories, or Naomi, before that, as many stories.
Well, I will say Melinda had nothing to do with Naomi.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So talk about that. Talk about that a little bit.
That was all Cyril. Yeah. But Naomi is a powerhouse. I mean, she's great. And she came back to write for us over the winter, I think. Yeah. She got articles that, actually caught fire a little bit, which is cool. I'm guessing she graduated this year. She goes to Pitt, but yeah, she's great. Cyril did all that. Wow. He found her, he mentored her, and she's very talented. So, I mean, I think that's part of it, is that we have a lot of people that want to write for us. And so we're really lucky with the quality of writers that we have that, decreases the workload on, shaping their stories, editing their stories, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think another really interesting point about that, because I've worked in this space for a while and I've met with other journalistic outlets and stuff. And the Beacon, I mean, look, freelance journalists are not getting paid what they're worth. And that's a whole conversation. And we could maybe just talk about that in a separate episode. And having said that, the Beacon does pay a fairly competitive rate for what other news organizations are paying out there. And I know how much people get paid, at other news orgs in Bucks County and elsewhere. And it is not what we are paying. And so because we're paying people, more, like a fairly competitive rate, depending on the scope of the story, et cetera, our minimums are like the maximums at other news outlets by and large. And so because of that, I think we're getting freelancers that maybe their work is at a slightly higher caliber, right? Because they have more training and whatever and expertise. And some writers are not going to get out of bed for the $50 that they're making to write for another news org, or $100. And so, so we're paying people not what they're worth, but for their time in a way that makes it more worthwhile for them. And then because we're paying a more competitive rate, our writers are going to spend a little more time on our stories than they might spend if they were getting $50 or $100. So I think that's part of the equation as well.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that's part of the equation. There are writers, freelancers of ours that also freelance at other organizations in Bucks County, because freelancers got to make a living.
Yeah.
But I've accidentally seen invoices that were supposed to go to the other org, and I was like, whew, they aren't making much at all over there. So I feel good that we're, giving people a decent amount of money, coming from the freelance design world. Like, we operate on a completely different level of pay. And I feel bad about that because all we do is make pictures, but we make a lot more money than writers. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, and I mean, we've talked about that. I mean, we had a whole episode about sort of visual storytelling and visual journalism and how, like, one of the reasons why a lot of news orgs are not able to pour as much into their visual storytelling is because, photographers can make a whole lot more money doing photography work outside of the journalism space. Yeah. And, same with videographers, et cetera. And so, like, those things can be cost prohibitive for news orgs to do for whatever reason. I don't know why writers are willing to write for penance, but whatever, or pennies on the dollar, but we should,
yeah, pennies for penance for pennies.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And so speaking of writers, we have Ben Bennett, who is our staff reporter, our first full-time reporter at the Beacon, and he's a Report for America core member. And so, yeah, Emily, can you talk a little bit about, I know, like, we're recording this and he's just started, Ben has just started, so we don't totally know exactly what the scope of his work is going to be. Oh. But just, I mean, you can describe his beat a little bit and some of the Report for America sort of funding that's supporting part of his work.
So, yes, we're recording this and Ben started working for us a couple days ago. So I don't know everything about how it's going to go and what his beat is going to look like. But my understanding from Cyril is that he is already reporting on Morrisville School District. And there's another one. I don't know. But anyways, he's going back right now and watching. Most school board meetings are recorded online and put online. So he's going back through all of the lower Bucks school districts and reviewing all of their meetings, like, just to get him level set so that he knows what's coming in the next month's meeting so he can hit the ground running with all the different school board meetings. Yeah, so he's education in lower Bucks, and he's taking his camera places. I understand. Yeah, that's about all I know so far. He is enjoying his job so far. So that's good.
Okay. Well, I'll fill in a little bit. So, Ben comes to us through a Report for America grant. Report for America funds half of his salary for his first year of work, and then a third of his salary for his second year. And then, if he stays on a third year, which we hope he will, they pay like 20% of his salary. And so that's the arrangement. My job is to raise the additional 50%, 2/3, and then, 80% and beyond. And per our Report for America's grant guidelines, 85% roughly of his reporting is going to be education in Lower Bucks County. Ben's also participating right now in a solutions journalism network cohort. We did get a $10,000 grant to do some visual storytelling with a solutions journalism lens through the Solutions Journalism Network. And so Ben's participating in that. And then, we have some grant applications out to kind of round out maybe some of the coverage that he's doing. But he's really, he's building his beat. He's building his beat on his own with some support from pro news coaches who are gonna sort of coach him independently, with support from Melinda and with support from Cyril, and then with some, grant deliverables through Report for America and the Solutions Journalism Network. And so it's really exciting to have Ben on board. I think he definitely has a spirit for innovation, and he's excited to build his own thing. Like, he knew he wasn't going to step into a ready-made beat. And so I think it'll be a mix of him pitching us stories and then sort of Cyril and Melinda assigning him stuff, and him, getting certain story assignments through participation in different grant cohort, learning opportunities. And he brings a mix of photography and writing expertise to the table, and reporting expertise. So it'll be really interesting to see some of what he produces through the written word, through sort of short video verticals, and then also through photography. So stay tuned, but that's what Ben does currently. That's what Ben does now, and we'll see what evolves. And then we have, I mentioned the video verticals piece, and we've talked about a little bit in the past, but we have Chaya Jones, who goes by CJ, and she is our social media strategist, digital person.
Oh, yes, I need to give her a title. She hasn't written her bio for our About Us page, and until she writes her bio, I'm not giving her a title.
Got it. Okay. Well, CJ, you're on notice. CJ actually does all of the, speaking of what people do, CJ edits these videos and puts out social media clips and stuff.
Yes.
So, yeah, Emily has now officially laid out the gauntlet, I suppose.
Yeah.
And bio bio will be coming now. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we have her, she has a job description because I just made job descriptions for everyone. And I think it's a social media manager or something like that. Yeah. So CJ shares our articles on social media after Cyril puts out the articles. And then she makes videos and little slides of some of the articles. It's all, how much we can afford of her time, how much, time we have, like all of the different pieces on what she does. But she also does edit these. She makes clips of Cyril's podcast. She's away this week, so I am also CJ this week. She helps with the ads, like the ads that Dara sells. CJ helps sometimes designing them, but she helps to put them up in our Broad Street ads. She does a little bit of web design and development. I have been teaching her for about a year. It's interesting. CJ came to us as an intern from Kutztown University. So her professor is Kevin Mahoney. She graduated, but she had to get a paid internship for her final requirement to graduate. And Kevin Mahoney is the producer of Cyril's podcast. And I did a podcast with Kevin before called Friday News Lunch, which we have since discontinued. Those, I loved them, but it was a lot to maintain. So Kevin brought her up and was like, I think she'd be a great fit. She's really good at all this stuff. And so we hired her last summer as an intern. And then I hired her to continue ever since then. And, she's been pretty great. I mean, it's a learning experience. She's early career designer type. She's not actually a designer, but she is in the realm. You know what I mean?
Right. And you sort of alluded to this, but she's working for us part-time. So CJ has like another job and then does some stuff for the Beacon in the morning before that job or at the end of the day or on the weekends or whatever, and really tries to post something on social media every day for us. But it is like one of those things where it'd be great to have a full-time social media person, but we don't, there's just not the funding for that or the bandwidth or the capacity. And so Emily, sometimes you'll do stuff on social media. Sometimes Cyril will sort of post things on different, I think he runs the Blue Sky pretty much himself.
Blue Sky and Facebook. He puts the Blue Sky and Facebook, just initial shares of our articles. And then CJ reposts it on other socials. And then she goes back and makes edited things for it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And yes, she has another job. She makes fancy coffees.
Yeah. Well, and so speaking of people with other jobs who also work for the Beacon, Lynn Aston is a member of our team, and she is our bookkeeper. And so, talk a little bit about what she does.
Yeah. So Lynn came to work for us last year. It all started to be too much for me. I just keep trying to eliminate parts of my job. And one part of my job was maintaining the budget and tracking our budget and paying our freelancers. And so we pay probably, depending on the month, 10 to 15 freelancers a month. And we need to keep track of their invoices and that everyone's been paid and then how much we're spending on different budgetary things. So Lynn does that. It's a very part-time position, but more recently, since you've been brought onto the team, Lynn's job has gotten more complicated.
Yeah, McKean, I know. Oh, yeah. Talk about what I do later, but yes, I'm very high maintenance. So.
Yeah. So Lynn is also managing, ad invoices. Now, when you sell ads, And Lynn is invoicing people and making sure we receive that money. And then also grant payments. And she also interfaces. We actually have an outside accounting firm that does payroll and like our taxes and stuff. And now they're collaborating on our QuickBooks integration so that we're going to have everything in QuickBooks, which should streamline Lynn's job now that it's gotten more complicated. And yeah, she's the one that calls me and says, "What is this charge?" And then I have to tell her what it is and how to categorize it. So that is Lynn's main job, is getting me on the phone and asking what I'm spending money on. What is this? Yeah, it's a plugin. It's a plugin for our website so it doesn't crash. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think that leaves me, right? I'm the last member of the team. So yeah, so I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at the Beacon, which essentially means that I'm in charge of bringing in the money to keep the Beacon running. And I think I was onboarded really to diversify, with the mission of diversifying our revenue streams. We were sort of and still remain kind of overly reliant on the fiscal support of a couple of core donors. And so the goal and the job was to really diversify that revenue through grants, through individual donor donations, reader revenue, advertising, sponsorships, events. And I think those are the revenue streams. And so, yeah, I started in October of last year. Emily and I had a conversation where we met through a LenFest conference and hopped on a Zoom, and she said, "Yeah, I think I'm looking for a part-time development person." And I said, "I actually think you need a chief revenue officer." And she said, "Great, can you do that?" And so here I am doing that work. And then in addition to working to bring in revenue and make the Beacon more financially sustainable, I would add that I've kind of taken on the community engagement piece of the work for the Beacon, like doing some listening sessions, throwing some both small donor cultivation events and larger kind of community outreach events. Little plug for September 24th. If you're in Doylestown, come to our Beacon Turning 5 party. But yeah, because I think community engagement is a really important piece of the puzzle as a community news organization. But I was probably the person who had the most capacity to do that. And then it was kind of an outpouring of the work I need to do anyways through revenue generation to kind of build community partnerships and get to know people and learn about things. And occasionally, I mean, it so far it's really only worked the one way, where like I'll hear about really interesting things that are happening in the community and then I'll tell Cyril about them, and sometimes those will lead to editorial stories. It's kind of a conflict for him to like give me advertising leads, so it really doesn't happen that way so much. But sometimes people will email into our general mailbox with things, and either Cyril or Emily will forward those leads to me and say, "Hey, this is an advertising lead. Will you follow up with this?" So yeah.
Or could be an advertising.
Yeah.
I think that is the interesting part, because before you were on the team, like Cyril and I both monitor that info at buckscountybeacon.com email box. And, he would get all sorts of stuff. And there was this one time something came through and he like wrote a story or had someone write a story about it. And I was like, bro, that's advertising. Like, we should be getting paid for this,
Yeah.
And like, that's where like my mind I'm always looking at things in this, unfortunately, money, but that's how that's got to make the bacon, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, without the revenue, there's no way for an organization to exist. But without the editorial, like, there's no way to really raise the revenue. And one of the things recently, Melinda contacted me because she was writing an article about grants and sort of our success with funders. And one of the things that I shared with her, and that I think is not a testament to me or my work, but a testament to the work that the Beacon is doing on the editorial side. So far, the grant like sort of success rate has been about 50%. 50% of the grants that I've applied for, we have received. And that's pretty unheard of. And I think it speaks to the quality of the editorial content and the journalism that is being produced at the Beacon just being like really stellar. And I have nothing to do with that. That's all Cyril and his team and the freelancers and the Melinda and the staff reporter and stuff. But like, the Beacon is something that funders are eager to fund because they can see how the news that we're producing is a public service and it's really good for the community and it's providing essential information to community members. So yeah, I mean, hopefully Cyril never starts thinking about the revenue and always thinks about the editorial stuff.
Yes.
And you and I can just think about how to bring money in.
He doesn't think about it. It's like, can I buy this? Can I buy that? No, that's not true. He's not like that. But the more reporters we have, the more money it costs. And he's like, oh, I got this new freelancer and this one. I'm like, you have your budget.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, and this is, I don't know what to do about this, but this is something that we talk about behind the scenes. Like, my job is bringing in money. Sometimes I bring in money with no real deliverables, right? It's gen op support. It's individual contributors sort of making donations, which is great. Sometimes there's grants with certain tangible deliverables. Like the Report for America funding is amazing that we got that. It also came with a price tag, like, oh, okay, now we've got to raise the money to come up with our half to meet this deliverable. And so it is exceptional. We are so grateful for that opportunity, but there are times when Emily and I might decide, okay, we can't apply for this particular grant because it comes with deliverables. It requires a certain outpouring of money that we need elsewhere, or we don't have, or we don't know how we can come up with because, of our current revenue needs and our current expenses are not covered in these ways. So there's a lot of editorial strategies informed by revenue capacity. And then a lot of like revenue generation efforts really need to be informed by like, what can the editorial team achieve? What is this going to cost us to do? If we get this money, is it going to come with more strings attached, et cetera, et cetera?
Do we need to hire different people, more people? Will this cover any part of our current budget? Or
and if we get a grant that's like covers a certain person for a year, like, is it responsible to, what happens after the year? Like, is it worth it for us to try to raise that money? And so there's a lot of behind the scenes calculations that happen, I think, both on the editorial side and on the revenue side about like what we want to do and then what we realistically can do, and like not biting off more than we can chew so that we can continue to serve our audience.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I'm over here as the publisher being like, you need to get more money that is completely unrestricted. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of getting money that is completely unrestricted, we have come to the part in this podcast where I make a pitch. Like, if you love the Beacon, if you have found value in the work that we do and the reporting that we do in these behind the scenes conversations where you're learning more about news, please go to buckscountybeacon.com. You can click that support button and make a donation. You can make a one-time donation. You can make a monthly recurring donation, like a subscription, like you subscribe to Netflix or anything else. And it really does make a difference. I think Emily and I have chatted about this before on the podcast, but only 1% of our readers are donors and give to our efforts. And we understand that not everybody has the capacity. And we do this work because we want to remain paywall free and we want to remain accessible to those in need. But if you have capacity, your donation, even a $5 monthly donation, a $10 monthly donation really does go a long way. And it supports the news and the revenue generation and the, Lynn and CJ and Melinda and Ben. I mean, it really, it keeps us going. And eventually maybe we'll raise enough so that Emily, instead of having 5 jobs, can have 2 jobs, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I'm actually trying to eliminate one of my jobs with a piece of technology. So as we rebuild our website, there is this new product and I might be migrating, and then we will have 24/7 tech support, which will take that whole thing off my plate. So I just have to make it fancy and pretty when I want.
Yeah.
So that would be amazing.
That's amazing. How much does that, out of curiosity, if you know, how much does that technology cost?
They are still figuring out the number. I've got a meeting with him tomorrow, but they have to figure out exactly what capacity we need. But it is going to cost between $600 and $2,000 a month.
Okay. So yeah, so if you're listening to this and you want to support those efforts, yeah, I mean, knowing that it would be somewhere between $600 and $2,000 a month, I think is helpful. Like it's always helpful for me as someone who, donates to other organizations and issues and causes that I care about. Like I always want to know, what does something cost? And like how much, if something is $600, donating $100 is actually getting us a sixth of the way there. Like that makes a really big impact. So yeah. So.
Yeah. That's how much it costs. I'm hoping to have there's going to be some tiny savings of other things that we subscribe to, other plugins and stuff like that. So there would be a little bit of savings here and there. But yeah, I mean, it's expensive, but it's better than hiring a chief technology officer. That is for sure.
Right. And then also thinking about freeing up your time. Like if you're able to spend some time meeting with potential donors, like we can make that back potentially, right? And so it's always these calculations. But I'm glad that people like tuned into this. I'm glad people are interested in what we do and learning more about the Beacon. I as someone who works in this industry, I feel like that it's often very mysterious. I'm like, what did people do and how did this get to me? So so thanks for yeah, right. Yeah. So thank you for listening to this or watching this, episode of Behind the Beacon. I think it was really valuable for me, and maybe we can do some more delving into some of the specific things that we talked about next time.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.